The title was wrong for some reason. We have to change that in a minute. I think I've changed it. Maybe. Yes, I have. Okay. I don't know what was going on. Anyway, big day today. Well, I say a big day. I mean, it's part of a big day. So, I mean, let's catch up with where we are. Trump has now released a document which basically says Europe, as far as he's concerned, the way Europe does things, which has some differences to the United States. We are, for example, pro-regulation in the interests of consumers, whereas America is all about max profits of the consumers, even their own public. And that has Trump. I mean, there's always been a bit of that. This is not just purely Trump. There's always been that element in America where it's, you know, this ultra-capitalist notion, which we don't go for much in Europe. There are obviously ultra-capitalists in Europe, but they're not powerful enough. So we have much more of an attitude of, hang on a minute, can we make sure that this is in the best? Well, there's enough people in Europe have an attitude of, let's make sure this is in the best interests of people, shall we? And the EU have been responding to that for the last few days, but now we've got this situation. Like, if you combine that with Trump pushing, I had hoped, I said it on Saturday, didn't I? I had hoped that Trump getting that FIFA Peace Prize might calm him down a bit, but he's still pushing and pushing and pushing for Zelenskyy to accept a peace deal, which requires him to give up territory. Now, and you keep reading about territorial disputes. It's like, there are no territorial disputes, right? There's Ukraine's borders and everything inside it is Ukraine's territory. It makes no difference that an invading force disputes it. That's not a dispute, is it? Is it a dispute for America? You know, that's what Trump should be asked. Do you dispute these borders? And on what basis do you dispute these borders? Utterly ridiculous. But anyway, Trump is pushing for it. Trump, if he wanted to go fully on the side of Russia, he could do various things. He could pull all support for Ukraine. He's not providing anything that really takes much in the way of funding from the US defence budget, by the way. Not that it was costing them much of that under Biden either, but, you know, there was at least something there. But, you know, Trump could just take all of it away. In which case, because, I mean, I'll never know. We'll never know. Well, we won't know this side of the next 20 years anyway. But I do think to myself, in that situation, America's doing nothing for us. It's already hurting our trade. If you think about the twin things Europe needs America for. I mean, we're culturally, even though we have our differences, we're culturally quite close. You know, Jamie Dimon, CEO of JP Morgan, was talking last week about how close Europe and how mutually dependent Europe and America are. It's like, it's not just that Europe leans on America a lot. We do for defence. But America needs us as well. It needs Europe as well. You know, Dimon was making that point really clearly. It's not really how a lot of Americans see it, or a lot of these MAGA supporters see it. And it's certainly not how Trump sees it. He doesn't, you know, he sort of sees Europe as a bit of a leech on America, which is a bit of a problem, because by the time he finds the truth out, if he puts it all to the test, America's knackered and he'll be long gone anyway. But I do wonder to myself, like, if you think about it, so Trump has already harmed Europe's economy with his ridiculous tariffs. He's threatening them with, you know, Europe, the EU and the UK have both had to tone down our efforts to strengthen online regulation, social media company regulation, right? Because we were both set for demanding better of social media companies to police their own sites properly. Basically, we were holding up Twitter as a model of how not to do it. Well, that seems to have fallen by the wayside. In the UK, I don't think we've officially abandoned those plans, but we've just stopped talking about them. Whereas the EU have had to make announcements, so they have officially watered down those plans. So on trade, you know, and on tech, America has weakened Europe already, and we've accepted it. Like I say, the EU is in the most powerful position to not accept it, and it's accepted it. But, and what for? For security. So if Trump threatens that security, I mean, is this what's happening behind closed doors? Is European leaders basically saying to Trump, if you take away this security, you are giving us nothing, and therefore why should we, is this what they're saying behind closed doors? We have given you a lot. We've given you a lot on trade. We have agreed to boost defence spending for NATO. We have even aligned with you more closely on big tech regulation. We have done that for you. If you take away, and we have done that in return for security, if you take that away, then you have given us nothing. So why should we give you anything? We'll take back what we've given you. Is that what because I really hope that's what they're doing behind closed doors. But there we go. Has anyone seen what the Belgian PM said? He's a right-wing nationalist who obviously favours Russia. No, I don't think so anyway. I was looking at some tweets from European leaders. Where was... Hang on a minute, where was it? Oh, that was Poland's Deputy Prime Minister responded to Elon Musk saying, "Go to Mars, there's no censorship of Nazi salutes there." That's what you were saying. Belgian PM, right? Yeah. I mean, I don't think Belgium is hideously pro-Putin, certainly not in the same way Hungary and Slovakia are. But of course, there are far-right leaders in Europe, both in government and in opposition, who may, and this is the problem with that national security strategy that was released by the White House, recently, that Europe really should see it as a serious threat for which they need to decide what they're going to do about it. But the problem is, groups on the far right in Europe will not, even the ones who are in government right now, will see it as less of a threat, because what Trump is really threatening is the sort of liberal democracy that they're opposed to anyway. Like, even when you've got figures like Giorgia Meloni, who clearly recognises the threat Putin faces, she doesn't necessarily, I don't know what she views about the threat Trump places on them. So that's the problem. There are European leaders who judge the threat of Russia differently, and they judge the threat of Trump differently. And therefore the United States. I mean, Trump is now the United States. And that makes it very difficult to form a unified response. There's lots of things that make it very difficult for Europe to form. I've done a video on it for this afternoon, but there's various things I didn't mention in it because the video was already getting very long. But again, in terms of the big players in Europe, we are at least currently aligned. I mean, we are not in the EU, but Keir Starmer is still... he knows that we cannot agree to this US peace deal as it currently stands. Macron and Merz, same thing. And that's Zelenskyy is meeting with these. And these are the leaders of the three largest militaries. Donald Tusk is also aligned, obviously, with Ukraine. And actually, even though Poland's president is, you would say very right-wing, maybe even far-right, he is also... not pro-Putin, at least. So he's more like Meloni in that can still see Russia as a threat. So they're still on Ukraine's side. EU fined Twitter. Yeah. That was actually being brought up. Where was it? Well, there was a comment about that now. It might have been Costa. But someone in the EU, a senior member of the EU, was actually pointing out that... Can't find it. Wasn't Costa who said something else. That basically, he's just basically having a whine because we fined him, but we fined him for breaches of the law, not like opinions. Can't find it now. But someone was saying, we do have freedom of speech. That's why you can post this crazy shit on Twitter. Trump is now voicing concern at the Netflix deal simply because his best mate Ellison didn't get it. Yeah, exactly. He doesn't give a shit about monopolies, only when he doesn't have them. I just want to say about your video on Christianity yesterday. I've noticed it too, find it deeply concerning. Recently converted to Christianity and getting baptised on Sunday. I mean, the thing that annoys me the most, obviously different people have different views on morality and therefore will have different views on the rights and wrongs of asylum and immigration. But, you cannot claim to be a Christian when Christianity does, it's not vague. There's nothing vague about it. It has a very clear, given that these things have been translated from multiple languages going back to Hebrew and ancient Greek, they're still very, very clear about the principles of Christianity. And it's like, if you don't adhere to those, you're not a Christian. You can be something else. You can still say you're religious. You can still say you're spiritual. But if you don't fundamentally agree in those principles, you're just not a Christian. It's really that simple. There are atheists who are better Christians than people like Tommy Robinson and Jacob Rees-Mogg and Donald Trump. MZ saying there, so move fast and break things. That's Trump's attitude, move fast and break things. In the belief that America is strong enough to pick up the pieces if it doesn't quite work out as he expects, which maybe it is, maybe it isn't. All I do know is that while America is smashing stuff up, China and Russia is acting with more strategy. Even though Putin's basic strategy unfold, I mean, just imagine. I mean, can you just think how different it would be if the Democrats had taken the last election seriously? If instead of covering for Biden's decline, they'd have said to him much earlier on, you can't fight the next election. If they'd have organised primaries, if they'd have got someone in place who would have been, someone they thought would have given them the very best chance and then given them a good amount of time to get their campaign together. Can you just imagine the difference it would have made? Because I think Trump was there I think Trump could have been beaten. If the Democrats had approached the election seriously with enough time last year, when you look at how close the vote was really, in terms, I know that's the popular vote, but when you look at it, if they'd have run a really good campaign with a long run-up, it was a short campaign. It arguably had the wrong person, but it's very difficult to separate these factors out because you don't know which one was the greater factor. But it was a bad campaign. It didn't have enough time to bed itself in. And arguably the person was a risky person to go with as well. Just imagine the difference it would have made if the Democrats would have won last year and Trump was in jail now. We know he would be in prison right now. Just imagine that. The difference it would have made to the whole world. This is insane. I don't wish death on anyone, but I'm really looking forward to reading Trump's obituary. See, I'm not. What's the point? The damage he will have done by the time he might last another 10, 20 years. Remember, he doesn't live a particularly unhealthy life. I mean, his nutrition's not great. But, he does get some exercise for his age. Golf is, for someone his age, is exercise. It's more exercise than I get, in all honesty. And he doesn't smoke and he doesn't drink. And remember, just in terms of medical, particularly like, you and I, if we see something that is of concern, we'll go to a doctor. Maybe the NHS at some point does some tests on us and we can find out what it is, right? Sometimes that happens quickly, sometimes not so quickly. By which time it may or may not be very advanced. Whereas if you're really rich like Trump, you are getting checkups all the time. You're getting health checkups at least twice a year. And full scans. They're not just, you don't just go to your doctor, I've got this concern. They're just scanning for things whether you've got a concern or not. So anything that gets picked up in Trump, anything that could finish him off, will get picked up early. So he could be around for another 20 years. It's his brain that will go before his body, I suspect. At which point, then what's the point? All that happens then is, it means when he's left office, even if, as someone said, they were talking about the statues of Assad being brought down in Syria. Someone was saying in 10 years' time, this will be what's happening to the statues of Trump, which don't technically exist yet, but I suppose they will. But what's the point? Let's say Trump's still alive and America takes back control. Will Trump find himself in court? No, because he'll just then claim he's not fit to stand trial, and they'll probably be correct. That'll probably be a correct assessment. So I'll draw no succour at all from Trump either losing power. I mean, it needs to happen just to stop things getting worse. But even if he loses power, it'll be grim satisfaction. It won't be anything to cheer because of the damage he'll have done. What if Russia withdrew from all Ukraine land and Ukraine doesn't join NATO? That would be fine, because what you could then still do is make sure that Ukraine can bolster its own defences along the border. At the end of the day, Ukraine cannot realistically join NATO anyway if the USA refuses, and the USA is going to refuse. So Ukraine doesn't even have to agree to not join NATO. It can't join NATO if the USA vetoes it. So yeah, anything that has Russia withdraw from Ukrainian land is fine. Not a problem. The war ends tomorrow if Russia agrees that. There will be no comeback. I mean, Russia will still be expected to pay reparations, because, but that could just be in the form of the Russian assets that have been seized in Europe, which won't cover the full cost. But I think, if Putin agreed to give up those assets and withdraw from Ukraine, I think, Europe would bite his hand off. Well, we'd quite like to bite his hand off, but you know what I mean. Russia will be back in a couple of years. Well, actually, no. If it withdraws, I think we must recognise we made the serious error. Ukraine doesn't have to join NATO for individual NATO countries, doesn't even have to be coordinated by NATO, to supply Ukraine with the defences it needs to make sure that if there's a similar build-up again, that it can be repelled this time. So, no, actually, at this point, Russia withdrawing completely is absolutely the basis for a peace deal. You don't need anything more than that. You wouldn't get any. You won't even get that. I mean, realistically, at the moment, the argument at the moment on territory is not about whether Russia should be able to stay on the territory it already sits on, but whether it should be given more. The argument on territory right now is whether Ukraine should concede land that it currently controls, and Russia has spent nearly 3 years trying to take and been unable to. Nearly 4 years now. The US are too sexist to elect a woman. Well, that is my worry. That was my worry with Harris. Trump looks like he's had a stroke. His family's riddled with Alzheimer's. I mean, you look at, he's clearly not right. He definitely has days when he's not right, and that's when they keep him away from the cameras. It's just like with Biden, only with Trump it's much worse because he's malevolent with it. And he never was clever to begin with. So he's a stupid man whose brain is failing. I say Kremlin would just repeat the same but better prepared, but Europe would be better prepared as well. And because Russia's economy is knackered, Europe can actually prepare faster than Russia. If we could get Russia out of Ukraine, I mean, it's largely speculative this because we can't. There's no way, like people keep saying, and they're dead right as well, Putin cannot agree to anything that doesn't give him more territory than he currently has. So Putin, politically speaking, cannot agree a deal that freezes the battle lines where they are, because that will look like a defeat for him. What's he gained? Nothing. So Putin's not going to agree to anything unless either forced to, or he gets something he doesn't currently have. But if he gets something he doesn't currently have, and I don't mean a fee for peace prize, because I don't care about that. Yeah, give him a fee for peace prize. If that'll get him to leave, what the hell? Why not? Say Trump is disintegrating, but for the best medication he would already have left us. Well, yes. His brain would have anyway, I'm sure. The New York judge could have sentenced Trump to prison time. I think he should have deferred pronouncing sentence until the day after his term ends. I don't think you could do that realistically. I suspect the problem... Once he'd been convicted, if that conviction was a threat to Trump, he can make it, I don't know. I just think, given that it all had been established, that you cannot basically put a US president on trial or convict them of anything, the judge probably couldn't do anything. I don't know. Say Europe be better prepared, just like Europe prepared in 2020. Europe didn't prepare in 2020. Europe has been, for the longest time now, basing its strategy on optimism, like all the way through Trump's first term. That should have been a warning. Actually, the warning should have come under Obama. Obama was a perfectly sensible US president. And yet, even under Obama, there were warning signs for Europe that America was not entirely aligned on security issues. That should have been a warning. But Trump was more in your face about it. Trump should have been a warning. Europe seemed to base its strategy on just tickle along, wait for his term to end and hope he loses, which he did. And then they all thought, oh, great, finished, done. So there's no preparation. We've done no preparation at all. We're only now this year starting to prepare. And even then you can see how difficult it is because you've got these, different European, that's why this different European countries are, first of all focused on their own national interest. Remember, countries like the United States, you compare the EU and the United States, the EU could be on a par with the United States in terms of economic and military power. That would be possible. We're a long way behind, but it would be possible. The thing that makes that very unlikely is that the United States has central leadership. There's a lot of devolution in the United States, but when it comes to things like the military and national economic strategy, then you've got central leadership, you've got a leader. Europe doesn't, right? It's a strength and a weakness. It's a strength in that it's much harder to corrupt the EU, but it's a weakness in that you've got no central driving, guiding light. They've all got to come to these agreements together. They've all got their own national interests, which they can't, if for a national emergency, you can sort of sacrifice some parts of the country to make sure the collective works. You can't do that with the EU because each individual bit of it is going to back its own self-interest. But beyond that, like I say, you've got some leaders who they don't agree on the threat Putin faces. Some of them don't think he poses a threat at all. Some think it's not as serious a threat as some others think. So there's a disagreement on even what is the level of threat. And unless you can agree the level of threat, you can't agree the level of response. The greater the level of threat, the more powerful the response can be, because every response comes at a cost, a literal cost, actually, an economic cost. So every response comes at a cost. But also these different leaders judge Trump to be, some of them don't even judge Trump to be a threat at all. As that's there. Even if a couple of years' time America revert to normal, I strongly suspect they won't. There would still be a ballroom to remind everyone of the blob. The ballroom is probably the least offensive of the things Trump's done. At the end of the day, as far as I can tell, a US president is allowed to restructure the White House. They sort of are the boss of it. The only issue is who's paying for it. Is there some level of corruption with the payment of it, the funding of it? That's the issue with the ballroom. It's not the ballroom itself. The ballroom may well be lovely at the end of it, and it may well be a perfectly good addition to the White House. It's just there doesn't seem to have been a very transparent process for the funding of it. Binary there saying he would have pardoned himself. Well, he wouldn't have been able to because this was a state crime. Also, he probably can't pardon himself. He could probably get himself pardoned for federal offences because it's really quite simple. He just stands aside for J.D. Vance as long as he trusts him. J.D. Vance, I think he would. J.D. Vance would pardon him. So Trump could have had himself pardoned for federal offences but not state-level offences. Zelenskyy should hold out for full NATO and EU membership. That territory will be mostly under water in another century, and Crimea was conquered by Russia. I don't think, again, a strategy that sort of works on the idea that climate change might not be a bad thing is great either. The problem is Russia could, if you had some sort of ceasefire that lasted a couple of years, Russia would continue on its war economy. It would rebuild for another go, wouldn't it? Or go somewhere else. He's got others in his sights. From Europe's point of view, we need to stop Russia attacking anywhere. Say Trump looks like he had a stroke. While it's obvious to interested in politics, was it obvious to the average voter? It makes no difference. The average voter doesn't pay attention to elections. Like the average voter pays no attention to politics for most of the time. They'll catch the odd headline and stuff. And then come the election, they'll maybe read a few things or watch a few things, watch the odd debate. That's it. And if in that debate, all you see is one candidate promising you cheaper bills and more trade and going to get tough with the world and make America great again, and the other one talking about what a dangerous lunatic their opponent is, but it's like, okay, great, but what are you offering me? Oh, nothing, more of the same? Right, I don't want that. It's an absolute nightmare. It was the campaign just, it was the same campaign. It was like 2016 Brexit referendum all over again, where the Remain campaign was all about the doom and gloom of leaving, whereas the Leave campaign was attacking the Remain campaign, but also promising a better life for people. Well, you know, people have got a choice between the better life. A lot of people don't really think about whether a politician's lying because they just sort of assume they are. So they just go based on the promises. So one side's promising you better standard of living. The other side's not even promising that. And it's like, well, if the other side won't even promise you a better living, when we know that politicians overpromise anyway, then it's like, you're not going to give us anything. Because if the side that was promised, you know, the better side, should we say, the sane side, I would look at it this way if I was an average voter. If this party, whether it's the Remain campaign, whether it's the Democrats, whatever, if they won't promise me a better standard of living, then that means they're not even intending to. They could look at the Republicans, they could look at Trump and say, he's promising a better standard of living. He might be lying about some things, but he's promising it, so he will feel compelled to deliver at least something. Whereas the Democrats weren't promising that, or as far as the voters could tell, they weren't anyway. They weren't promising that. They were just saying how much worse it would be under Trump, at which point they will feel under no obligation to deliver for me. Do you know how it works? They say, exactly explain why we can't count on Europe being prepared. I think there's a good chance some leaders will drop it all at first opportunity to return to normality. There are some leaders who would 100% do that. The thing is then, who can Ukraine rely on? It can't rely on America. At the moment, Zelenskyy is saying, he's asking the question, so let's say we agree to something. Let's say we agree to something. And then in a few years' time, Russia comes back again and attacks us again. What is Europe and what is America going to do about that? That's the question he wants answering. Now, what I would say is this. Whatever Trump says he would do, and at the moment he's not saying anything, he's not giving any guarantees, but whatever Trump, because all Trump is saying is that Putin won't do that. He won't do it, which is not helpful. It's like, but what if he does? What will you do? And if Trump is so confident that Putin won't do anything, it's like, so why won't you commit to declaring war against Russia then? Because if you're convinced it's not going to happen, then it doesn't matter, because it'll never happen. You'll never have to declare a war on Russia because Russia will never attack, right? So if you're totally convinced that Russia will never attack, then why not agree to declare war on Russia at that point, and not only reinforce Ukraine in battle in Ukraine, but counter-invade Russia as well and take out their forces inside the Russian border? Why not do that? But here's the thing. Let's say Trump did. Let's say you cornered Trump with questions like that and Trump agreed. You wouldn't trust him. SFAT's just saying, I don't expect America will help us again. No, I don't. And I don't care. I don't think it even necessarily matters who's in charge. This is why I think there is more of an impetus in Europe now amongst a lot of nations to recognise Europe has to be, however this one ends, when the next one comes, and there will be another one to come, there will always be another one to come, Europe recognises that it's on its own now. It's just that it can't be on its own now because it takes too long to build up. And the way they're building up isn't the most efficient way they could build up. Because again, they're being governed by national interest. Can be no other way. Sooner the world can return to normality, the better, but I fear we won't ever get back there again. No, I really don't think we can. Misinformation, disinformation, never been this bad. No, that's exactly why I don't think we can ever. I think America might come out of this better. It may come out stronger. That's possible. I'm not saying I think it will, but I think it might. But what I don't think is going to come out of this I think I am not going to live to see the day when the world has decided to combat disinformation. I think it's here to stay for a very long time. I think it's got its claws in too deep. I think even if America sort of turned back at some point, it's not going to happen for some time. You look at the damage that's already been done. Trump's not even been in power for a year yet. And you look at the massive amount of damage he's done. And I kept saying before he even won the election, he kept constantly said, people kept thinking it'd be like his first term, which was bad enough, but nowhere near this bad. And I kept saying it can't be like his first term because Trump was constantly explaining in public how he thought his big problem in his first term was he kept listening to people who kept telling him no. So he was determined in his second term to not listen to those voices. So he was always going to work at pace in his second term. He has done. It's just fortunate that he's an idiot and surrounded by other idiots and not everything is going according to his plan. But if you think about the amount of damage he's done in less than 11 months, and then you think about the damage he's going to do in the next year, and then 2 years after that, and that's assuming things go well for us. So Vance isn't going to be any better. I don't know. I don't think he's a better character. He may have less authority than Trump as president. So I think, you know, this is, I always used to describe myself as a cynical optimist. So I think the world is fundamentally on the wrong footing, but it's got its eyes on a better future, right? That's how I thought, that's how I perceived the world. Basically, it's not good, but it is going to get better. Now I'm just a cynic. I actually don't think the world's going to get better. I think it's almost like a porridge situation, little victories. You know, Starmer talks all the time about trying to avoid managed decline. Well, I think when it comes to key issues, we are in managed decline. Like, I know Labour, when they talk about that, they mean the economy, and they're trying to sort of boost the economy and strengthen the economy. But I would say when it comes to national security, we are in managed decline, because the sort of disinformation being pushed in the media, the mainstream media and social media, is a serious threat to everyone's national security. It's a threat to ours. It's a threat in every country. And because we're not doing enough, we are doing more than we were a few years ago, but we're not doing enough to counter that threat. Then I just see that we are in managed decline. We are actually in decline. And I keep saying, I don't know what's going to happen at the next election. I hope that Labour still wins. But the one after, I would not be at all confident. I do think something like Reform UK is going to win power at some point in this country. And when that happens, I think we're not just going to, like when the Tories were in power for 14 years, we went back a lot of steps. They just stopped investment. So we were just in terminal decline. But I think the damage that a Reform UK type government would do would be catastrophic. Whereas what the Tories did wasn't catastrophic. Obviously, Brexit was hugely damaging, but it is possible to recover. But I don't think we'd recover from a Reform UK period of government. Say Rubio's dead weight, yeah, he is, he's useless. Because he knows a lot of this is wrong. He's been sidelined largely. World has set itself back 50 years in regards socially and economically. Well, it is. But the thing is, if we end up, like, while America remains the dominant country in the world, then from the point of view of those of us in the West, there is always hope that America sorts itself out. But at the point at which China overtakes as the dominant force in the world, which is entirely plausible, because even though its own economy is not exactly powering up, nonetheless, America withdrawing aid from around the world leaves the way open for China to gather up an awful lot of soft power around the world. So China is certainly going to be increasing its influence around the world. So China could become the dominant country at some point in the future. And if at that point that happens, then you are basically just boned. It's all very depressing, isn't it? It's all very depressing. But I am just hoping, in terms of this meeting, that behind the scenes, and we will never know, behind the scenes, Europe is making it clear to Trump that we have given to you, we've given to you on the economy, we've given to you on NATO. The only thing you are giving us is a promise of security to Ukraine. If you take that away, you're giving us nothing, so we'll take back what we gave you. There needs to be that edge to them. And we know this from people who work with Trump, who've been close to him. They say to Trump, you know, he doesn't respect weakness. So you do have to have you have to sort of be on his wavelength, but you do have to have that steel to you, that edge. Otherwise, he will just keep taking and taking and taking. So I hope that there is some of that behind the scenes, but there it is. I also just note one last thing I will just say. So in this National Security Review, where he talks about all the wars he's stopped, he says, and over the course of just 8 months, we settled 8 raging conflicts. One of them, I note, is between Cambodia and Thailand. It's just killed a shitload of people, this raging conflict that he reckons he ended. Doesn't seem to have ended to me. As far as I say, it is very depressing. I expect my generation, including to me, to lay off not on this conflict, then in a larger one. Yeah, it's. I am incredibly worried. The best hope is that Russia actually just does collapse to the point where it cannot realistically build up another invasion force. But again, that's just hoping for things. You're hoping. I mean, we cannot base a strategy on hoping that our opponents will mess up in some way. Yeah, you know, it's like in life, you need a strategy that puts the agency on you. But anyway, on that depressing note, I'll leave it there. Thanks for coming, everyone. I will be discussing things on Twitch in just over 20 minutes. Link in the description below. Although I think I'll be starting that one off with Nigel Farage, but we will see what happens. But have a good rest of day. And until next time, I'll see you later.